So Nia Klein is, she's a retired teacher from Parkland. She has a master's in rhetoric and composition. She is also founder of Nia Klein Coaching and has an interest in neuroscience and spiritual formation, which is quite an interesting combination. So we are excited to get to hear from Nia tonight. She will have some slides to share. She will also be taking, I think, a live survey, which I am responsible for collating and commenting on. So I'm a bit nervous about that, but I will do my best. Otherwise, I know Nia is planning on allowing for plenty of time for questions afterwards, and I'm responsible again for leaving or for asking the questions. Feel free in your chat at any time to ask them, and we will try to get through all of them. So I am going to pray briefly. Hopefully this is briefly. I'm going to read a prayer, and then Nia, it's all you. So let's pray. O thou before whose eyes all human hearts lie bare and open, forbid that I should seek to hide from thee anything that I have this day done or thought or imagined. What must forever be hidden from the knowledge of others, that let me now openly acknowledge in thy presence. What no proper shame kept me from committing, that let no false shame keep me now from confessing. O thou whose tender mercies are over all thy works, humbly and sorrowfully I crave thy forgiveness for the sins of this day. For every weakening and defiling thought to which the mind has given harbor, for every word spoken in hastiness or passion, for every failure of self-control, for every stumbling block which by deed or example I have set in another's way, for every opportunity lost, for loitering feet and a procrastinating will. And grant that as the days go by, thy spirit may more and more rule in my heart, giving me victory over these and all other sinful ways. To thy loving guardianship, O Holy Father, I commend all those who are dear to me. Bless all those among whom my lot is cast, and grant them a satisfying sense of thy reality and power. Be with all those who tonight are in any peril or distress. Be in every sore heart, in every stricken home, beside every bed of pain, giving to all the blessing of thy peace. Amen. Okay, Nia, thank you. Thanks for indulging me in that rather lengthy prayer.
Thank you, Todd. Okay. Well, guys, this is my very, very first webinar. I've taught many classes. I even taught a group of 200 med students some time ago in a huge classroom. But so I'm no stranger to speaking, but the technology, I have to admit, kind of that's what makes me nervous. So bear with me with that. Okay, so like Todd said, I retired from teaching at Parkland College. I taught comp 100 college level composition. I also taught developmental, which just means those students who were unable to assess into a college level class. And that's important because that kind of fits in, you'll hear here in a minute. But so a little bit about me before we go into spiritual formation and the neuroscience. I've always been interested in what makes people tick, probably because I grew up in a household with some very strange dysfunctional parents. And I've always had a curious mind. So I was always interested in what made people tick. In fact, my bachelor's is in psychology. Then about this is 2021. In 2005, I had breast cancer, and as a result of that, I ended up being part of and getting advanced training in therapeutic writing through cancer, which led me to go back to grad school. What was so interesting, once I started studying how writing and trauma worked, how writing helps people who have gone through trauma, my interest in the brain just kind of went haywire, because I found that when anybody experiences trauma, you're in that fight, fight, or freeze mode, and the events that are happening to you actually jump over your linguistic part of the brain. And it's not until we attach language to them, to those events, that we can actually begin to make sense of them and heal from them. And I actually, much to my department's chagrin, but they ended up loving it, wrote my master's thesis on how we can use those therapeutic benefits of writing to help at-risk students write better, learn better, and succeed academically, which I actually implemented in my developmental classes at Parkland with a great deal of success. So after actually this kind of coincided when I retired. When I retired from Parkland, I also found out that I was ADHD and had some executive function disorders, something that I'd suspected for a long time, which again made me delve into brain science even more. So that's the basis of Klein coaching. I basically tutor and coach kids K through 12 with ADHD and executive function disorder. I help them find strategies that will work for them to help them be successful in school. So, and through all of this, looking into how the brain works and how it's wired and how trauma impacts it. I mean, like when I was teaching at Parkland, in my developmental classes, probably 90% of my students were from the South Side of Chicago. Many Monday mornings, we would have to process a shooting that they witnessed over the weekend. So that became part of my teaching reality. So through all of this, I start stumbling on Christian psychiatrists, psychologists, and researchers who were taking the neuroscientific data that secular scientists had accumulated and blending it and using it to show and glorify God in terms of how intricate and how specifically he wired our brains. And he wired them in such a way, well, it's more than I can talk about tonight, but in terms of spiritual formation, he wired our brains in such a way that we can enhance our spiritual formation by using that scientific data that researchers have shown to be true. So in this course, we will look at some of that secular research done, but then we will also look at the Christian researchers and psychiatrists and psychologists who have married that with how we as believers can use that for our own spiritual formation. And those people, the people that I tend to really like a lot are Kurt Thompson and Adam Young and Dan Allender. So you'll hear those names a lot, in addition to the secular ones like Dan Siegel and Bessel, van der Kolk, Peter Levine. Those are the big trauma researchers. So, a little background. Okay. When you, Todd, you're on. To the audience, when you think of spiritual formation, what do you think of? What does it mean to you? What does spiritual formation mean to you? Because I'm suspecting it means different things to different people, depending on the tradition you come from.
I'll start.
Okay.
It means a lot of work. Spending it from my background, it means spending a lot of time in the Bible. I'll give you some other answers if you want here.
Sure.
Becoming more like Christ, education, learning scripture, development and enrichment that's related to God.
Okay. Those are good.
Should I give a couple more? People are
sure, give a couple more.
Putting in the work to mold something about my inner self or spiritual life, regardless of what other people can see, becoming genuinely human, watching football. That's actually mine.
Watching
Sorry.
football? Okay.
I'm just throwing that in there because I think that is formative in some ways that probably aren't helpful.
Oh, of course.
So yeah, I think that's a good sampling.
Okay. Yeah, I think so too.
I'm sorry, one more, probably this is something suspicious, probably new agey. We're supposed to just read the Bible and pray.
Okay.
So there you have it.
An interesting array of definitions. Okay, so I've picked 3. The first one, formal definitions, is by Renovare, which is the Richard Foster, the foundation that Richard Foster founded. And they define spiritual formation is a process, but it is also a journey through which we open our hearts to a deeper connection with God. We are not bystanders in our spiritual lives. We are active participants with God, who is ever inviting us into relationship with him. I emphasize relationship for a reason, which you'll hear later. Okay, the second one is kind of long. It comes from Portland Seminary, George Fox University, from their spiritual formation page, which so Christian spiritual formation, according to them, is the process of being conformed to the image of Jesus Christ for the glory of God and for the sake of others. The focus of spiritual formation is the Holy Spirit, who guides the ongoing journey. The response is submission. Formation is an organic, lifelong, holistic process involving right thinking, right behaviors, right feelings of individuals and communities. Okay, now the last one is the Dallas Willard definition. Spiritual formation in the tradition of Jesus Christ is a process of transformation of the innermost dimension of the human being, the heart, which is the same as the spirit or will. It is being formed, really transformed in such a way that its natural expression comes to be the deeds of Christ done in the power of Christ. This was going to be my second question for all of you, but a lot of you already answered this. So I don't think, Todd, you're on now. You can take a break.
All right.
When we hear the term spiritual formation, most of us tend to think of the spiritual disciplines or habits, this list of things that we must do, like scripture reading, memorizing, reflecting, prayer, fasting, worship, service, solitude, discernment, and evangelism. Not everybody, if you researched that, not everybody would come up with the same, but that's basically the disciplines or habits. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with them. They are things that we should be doing, but I think it's how we go about doing them. Because I think even Todd, I think you mentioned this, that when we look at it as a list of things that we have to do, it becomes a checklist, it becomes ritualized. And that tends to make us feel inadequate and shamed if we can't get them all done, or we don't think we're doing them all right, or we don't understand them all. And then that tends to lead to frustration, because that spiritual growth that we were seeking and hoping for doesn't seem to be attainable. So therefore, we think we must be doing something wrong, because, of course, God isn't doing anything wrong. He isn't. So is there a better way? And I would posit that there is. Now, let's not get to attachment theory right yet. So that better way is still using those things, those habits and disciplines, through the lens of how God wired our brain. God wired our brain for connection with each other. And most importantly, in terms of spiritual formation, he wired it for connection with him, because it's a relationship. The real problem with that list of habits and disciplines is not the actual acts, but the fact that our neural circuitry has not developed, for various reasons, and for one very big reason that we're going to talk about here in a minute, in such a way that it enables us to move smoothly through that path, along that path to being more Christ-like and having the mind of Christ and being in relationship with God. Unfortunately, because we are humans and we are sinful and fall and all that theological stuff, I've yet to meet someone who I would consider is securely attached, or grew up being securely attached. And therein lies the essence of what we need to know about the brain and how God made our brain, so that we can journey successfully along that path. We'll never attain it perfectly this side of heaven, but understanding how God wired our brain, the ability that he's given us to rewire our brain when it hasn't been wired properly. I'm not saying it'll make it spiritual formation easier. It'll make it more attainable and more accessible, and not so much drudgery as checking off all of those. Did I fast this week? Did I reflect on scripture? Whatever. So what is this thing that I keep talking about? Attachment. Okay. So think back to when, well, most of us can't think back to when we were first born, but we all know that we were born and we were babies, right? We were pre-verbal then. We relied on our primary caregivers, in most cases our mothers, to supply everything we need, not just physically, but emotionally. Our mothers were supposed to attach to us in such a way that we felt secure and safe, and that we knew that our needs would be attended to, that our mothers were attuned to our needs. They could tell when we were unhappy or uncomfortable, and they would take care of us. every single time. But that usually doesn't happen. And there's the problem. So attachment theory was actually, which is really the basis of what's called interpersonal biology, which is more what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about, spiritual formation and neuroscience. It's interpersonal, it's called interpersonal neurobiology. And it's based on this theory, attachment theory, which John Bowlby, who was a British psychologist, actually it was 1958, believe it or not, that he developed this theory after studying abused children. The central, this is straight from him, the central theme of attachment theory is that primary caregivers who are available and responsive to an infant's needs allow the child to develop a sense of security. The infant knows that the caregiver is dependable, which creates a secure base for the child to then explore the world. Or, in other words, the process, wait, so, wrong place. It's a lasting relationship, a lasting psychological connectedness between two human beings. And we can all see that play out with our parents and our spouses and our children and our loved ones. But God wired us for that to play out with him too. And when our attachment has been to our primary caregiver has been compromised by a caregiver who is either an ambivalent caregiver, sometimes is attuned to the child, sometimes meets the child's both psychological and physical needs, and sometimes doesn't because they're too wrapped up in their own whatever, their own world, their own insecurities, their own stresses, or the extreme end of the primary caregiver who is totally unable to attune to and meet the needs of the infant in any way. We carry that with us the rest of our lives. It changes the neural pathways in our brain from the way God intended them to be. That would promote secure attachment. So if we haven't been securely attached, then, I mean, there's some people say there are 3 or 4 kinds of aberrant attachment: avoidant, ambivalent, and disorganized. I usually think just about avoidant and ambivalent because that's just, it's too nitpicky to go into all the others. But the avoidant attached person, as a child, as an adult, will be super anxious. They'll be super afraid of abandonment. They'll have a negative self-image. They'll always be looking to someone else for their sense of self-worth. The ambivalent one, if you've been ambivalently attached, then you tend to be more indecisive. You don't trust easily. You avoid conflict. You tend to please people. I should have put this in there. Does anybody see how that could affect? Okay, you don't have to answer that. But the rhetorical question is, does anybody see how that could affect how we relate to our God? If we have, from the moment of our birth, not been securely attached, and our neural circuitry is now It's called Hebron's axiom. Neurons that fire together, wire together. So as these negative patterns of attachment continue throughout our lives, they become harder and harder wired. When we come to a saving knowledge of Jesus, it can be really hard, well, almost impossible, to change those neural pathways so that we can form a good relationship with our Heavenly Father through spiritual formation. So that is why this is so important. But the cool thing is that God has given us, our brains, the ability to change those neural pathways. So one of my favorite people, I think he's Adam Young, is in Fort Collins, Colorado. He's a therapist. I forget what his credentials are, but he's a Christian, and he has done a lot of work with attachment theory, attunement, all that stuff. And he is very good at breaking it down and making it very accessible to the average person and relating it to our relationship with God and using scripture. And he has this excellent podcast called The Place We Find Ourselves. And as an example, the fifth installment, which was a few years ago, he has a podcast called Attachment. What is it and why is it important? Most of his podcasts are 35 to 40 minutes, so I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I'm just going to play a little, maybe a couple, 3 minutes of it. I hope.
You are listening to The Place We Find Ourselves, the podcast where we not only talk about all things related to story, trauma, and therapy, but also have the privilege of often hearing some of the sacred real-life stories of interview guests. I'm Adam Young, and this is episode 5, Attachment, What It Is and Why It Matters. Okay, today we are going to talk about attachment, a very, very important subject. Attachment refers to, at its most basic level, the manner in which you connect with other people. It's the emotional bond that you develop with the people you are closest to, the people who are there for you, the people who truly know you. We are biologically driven to attach to others in order to survive. When we perceive threat or danger, we're hardwired to seek protection from and maintain proximity to someone who will be there for us and who truly knows us. Now, why is attachment so important? Well, the short answer is because we're created in the image of a triune God, a we and not an I. This makes us highly relational creatures. And anytime we're talking about relationship, we're talking about connection. Attachment really refers to the manner in which you connect with others. As a result of your relationship with your primary caregiver, you either developed a secure attachment or an insecure attachment. And we'll talk about both of those in a moment. But I just want to give the following definition of a secure attachment. If you boil it all down, secure attachment is simply this: when there is relational rupture, the securely attached individual knows that repair is inevitable and it will be here shortly. In other words, secure attachment is embodied hope. It is the bodily based expectation that we will soon feel close and connected again. And it will come about without either one of us having to sacrifice our individuality. That's the core of secure attachment. Now, as we begin to talk about,
I think we'll stop there. Okay. So isn't that what we want with God, with our Heavenly Father, that kind of secure attachment? And in reality, he's the only one that can provide those things that Adam was talking about on a consistent basis. He will always be there for us. He will always put our safety as the highest priority, psychologically, physically, emotionally, spiritually. He's the only one that we can truly depend on for all of those needs, all of those connectiveness needs. No human being is able to provide that for us. That is the basis. And I don't know if you caught his use of the word know, being known. Kurt Thompson has a podcast called Being Known. Spiritual formation is also being known by God and knowing God in an intimate, securely attached way. That's why this is so important. And in this course, what I would like to do is yes, there will be some neuroanatomy because we have to learn some of the basic structures in order to understand how God molded, made our brains. And to look at these theories, both the secular research that was done, and like I said, the Christian application, and see how we can use the principles to enhance our journey to that being known and knowing God that I believe is truly the essence of spiritual formation. Because it's only in that knowing that we can be most Christ-like and most have the mind of God. So in this course, I would like to start with looking at what spiritual formation is and what it isn't, what various people, various theologians think it is, how they think about pursuing it or achieving it, and then look at the brain, how God made the brain, look at these theories of attachment and attunement, secure attachments versus insecure attachments. I like the way Adam at the end of the day, you're either securely attached or you're not. It doesn't really matter in reality whether it's avoidant or ambivalent or disorganized or one of the other terms that some psychologists use and researchers use. The bottom line is if you're insecurely attached, it's not it's not good, and it's not going to be helpful to your spiritual formation. So yes, and then I would like to use story. There is a series of books written by Sharon Gurley Brown, who is a spiritual director, and what else? But they're called, the series is called Sensible Shoes. It's the fictionalized account of 4 women who are very, very different, who end up being thrown together in a situation, and it follows their journey of spiritual formation through these 4 books. This writer is very, very good, very insightful, weaves in all of this stuff, all of the neuroscientific theory and research in practical, so that we can see how it works in practical everyday life. And I think it would be very interesting to like study some of the stories in that book, some of the characters, and line them up with the attachment theory stuff or other parts of interpersonal neurobiology. Okay, let's see. I also, okay. If you remember, Adam said something about because attachment theory is important because we have a triune God. It's not I, it's we. And this is kind of an aside. I thought this was interesting. There's two models of the brain. Most of you probably know the right-left hemisphere. The right is the creative, emotional, social side. The left is usually referred to as the 4 L's: language, logic, linear, and literal. But there's another model that has actually come back into vogue lately called the top-down model, named so by Paul MacLean in the 1960s, called the triune brain. Now, I find that absolutely fascinating. I haven't done a lot of study about that. I mean, I know a little bit, but when I saw that name, I thought, the triune brain, the triune God, very interesting. I think my fascination with the brain and neuroscience is because it just expands my wonderment and awe of God himself. The intricacy, the malleability, the capacity that God has given our brains is just beyond imagination sometimes. And it's something that I don't think, well, I never really understood or took advantage of that. And I think a lot of us don't, especially in North American Christian churches. So it's another reason why I'm very interested in this. So I guess, yeah, okay, I'm pretty much on time. So these are some of the resources. There are probably lots of others. I tend to be one of those people who will go down the research rabbit hole very quickly and spend hours, days there. But some of my favorite resources that will probably be incorporated into this class would be, like I said, Dan Siegel, Bessel van der Kolk. Bessel van der Kolk wrote The Body Keeps a Score. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's been making the rounds lately, even though it's an older work. It's maybe 15 years old now. Dan Allender, who is a Christian psychologist and weaves all of this stuff into story work, writing the narrative of your life and seeing God's writing in your life story. Adam Young, who you just heard, Kurt Thompson probably, well, not probably, he did write the book that probably impacted me the most of any book that I've ever written, called The Soul of Shame. I highly recommend it. We would probably be more working with Anatomy of a Soul, which is his kind of primer on interpersonal neurobiology and spiritual formation. Everett Worthington, who has done tons of research on forgiveness and reconciliation and interpersonal neurobiology. Dallas Willard, who is more theological, doesn't really refer to the interpersonal neurobiology so much, but obviously understands it, at least at an intuitive level. And then podcasts like Adam Young's The Place We Find Ourselves and Kurt Thompson's Being Known. I also throw these out here in this last slide so that if you're thinking about this class and not quite sure, then maybe you can look up some of these things and see if it piques your interest a little bit more or not. I hope it does. I think it's fascinating, but you know, I call myself a brain science nerd. So take that for what it's worth. Okay. I guess I'm ready for questions. There was so much more I could say. I had to cut it off somewhere. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening to me ramble. And I'm ready to take questions. So Todd, take it away.
I'm just, thank you. Man, there's a lot to try to absorb.
I know
there.
it's such a big subject. It's hard to narrow down.
I have a few comments and or questions.
Okay.
So, but I wanted to go back to this idea of neural pathways, and you mentioned that it's possible to change them. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Okay. So like I said, Hebron's axiom is that neurons that fire together wire together. The negative side of that is if you, as a child, or even as an adult, are in an insecure attachment and you repeatedly hear, you're no good, you're never going to be good enough, you'll never amount to anything, whatever the negative thing is, the more you think that, the more you hear it, the more you internalize it in your brain, the more it gets stuck there and it's hard to get rid of. But the positive side is that if we can learn through some of the models that Kurt Thompson, Adam Young, and Dan Allender and others have come up with this neuroscientific research, and begin to replace those negative thoughts, those negative neural pathways with positive ones, like I'm a child of God, I'm worth so much to God that he sent his son to die for me. If we are able to do that within these models enough that it will change those neural pathways, and then we will no longer react to them, the negative ones, and base our life upon them.
That's wonderful.
Does that help?
It does. I'm thinking of Augustine and his understanding of the human person and how we are. His I think it's from his Confessions where he says, "You have made us for yourself, and our souls are restless until they find their rest in you." But I'm not going to hijack this conversation, so I'm going to go straight to the most recent. I've got a panelist who's thinking, I'm going to combine these two if this isn't too overwhelming. Someone's making a comment about toxic Christian communities that lead some people to leave the faith because these negative pathways are so they're reinforced, and this relates to perhaps the positive question, or a question that's being asked by a participant here. How can pastors or church leaders help their people engage emotionally engage emotionally with God without getting caught in sentimentalism or alienating people who don't have as much of an emotionally engaged relationship with God? In other words, how do we do this wisely without manipulating emotions? Like an example would be maybe a coercive altar call. which, or I mean, reflecting on my experience in church, because I couldn't, or when I was sitting around the campfire, I didn't have a story of like the exact moment that I gave my life to Christ, I wasn't sure I was really a Christian, and I felt a lot of pressure and sadness because I didn't have that, that moment. I think maybe that's an example. So how might we
Okay.
avoid those kinds of pitfalls?
Okay. Well, I guess they are related, but in some ways, those two questions aren't. Interesting, that first one about toxic Christianity and toxic church communities. I actually attended an Adam Young webinar where he said, I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but he believes that the North American church has a spirit, and he doesn't mean a good spirit, an evil spirit of optimism permeating through it, meaning that we just hand out these prescriptions. Oh, you're in a troubled marriage or a troubled relationship, or your daughter's doing drugs or whatever. We'll pray about it. Here's some scriptures to read. Now go along your merry way. Everything will be okay. We don't want to get our hands dirty. Todd, you and I have talked a lot about that. We've been writing about that.
Yep.
That tends to be the default of the North American church. We don't like to get our hands dirty, yet I think we're commanded to. That's another topic for another time. How can we do it without being coercive? I think that, my belief would be that if pastors, I know it's putting a lot on pastors, maybe not just pastors, maybe we as a Christian community could learn more about the human brain, about how God wired it and designed it and what he designed it for, that we would be less likely to coerce each other, because we would see how really alike we are. Alike but different. That's going to take a little bit more long, thoughtful answer. But I think the bottom line for me would be that if more people could see God's hand in this, in our brains, in our experience, in how we relate to people and connect to people, how he's wired us to do so. That's why we're all suffering from pandemic fatigue. Kurt Thompson did a podcast about this. God not only wired us neurologically to be connected, he wired us physically in our skin cells to be close to people. I don't know. I know this is not a really good answer, but the bottom line is I think if we learn more about it, we would be less alienating of each other. Hopefully that's satisfactory. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm having trouble keeping up with all the questions.
Oh, wow.
We have, I'm still working through I'm going to go back to one of the earlier ones that was asked, and then I will circle back to a couple of the ones that have just come in. And this, I think, is a big one. How can we trust God when we haven't been able to trust anyone around us?
Exactly. That's what attachment theory is all about. We can't until we understand that the reason why we can't trust God is because we have not been securely attached. And we start using the models to reroute our neural circuitry so that we can become securely attached to God and to those around us, to the human beings around us. So we can't trust God if we can't trust anybody else, but we can learn to by changing our neural circuitry.
Okay. I've great. Thank you. I'm gonna jump right to another question. I think this is a really good one. How does the individual brain wirings, how do they relate to being the body of Christ? In other words, the local body of Christ, especially if in community we're all very different.
I'm not quite sure I understand what that question is actually asking.
I think maybe it's getting at if all of our if we're all different individuals and our brains are all wired in unique ways, is there I think it's getting at is this really a one size fits all for spiritual
No.
formation in the congregation?
No, definitely not. From my own experience, I would say the answer to that question is that once you understand the basic theories in science, then you have to go back and do the hard work of looking at yourself, your attachment styles, how those attachment styles were formed from primary caregivers, how they relate, how they are affecting your relationship with God. And then, because they're all going to affect us differently, for one, it might be a heightened sense of abandonment, fear of abandonment. For others, it might be a heightened sense of punitive action against a wrongdoing or a sin. So I'm not saying it's a short journey or it's a one size fits all. It's a long journey. It's a long journey of learning the basics, learning how you fit, how your individual experience and story fits into it. So then you can use and customize what these people have the Christian researchers and psychologists have learned in order to rewire your brain.
Yeah,
it's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, yeah, I think you're right. And I know like James K.A. Smith and others have been critical of the church in terms of teaching and preaching, have been critical of many churches treating individuals as if they're, I'm borrowing his phrase, brains on a stick. So I think it is fascinating to think about how forcing ourselves, say, to meditate on a passage of scripture can actually help rewire some of our circuitry. But I think there is also this danger that we forget that we are embodied creatures. And part of his critique is, it relates to what you were saying earlier, Nia, about the formative power of story, and how a lot of churches and pastors especially tend to overwhelm the congregation with information. And if it's often disconnected from a bigger story, then some of those deep truths don't make their way down to our soul. Right. I know that's biblical theological language, but I think we might be able to couch that in terms of neurocircuitry as well.
Right. Well, what did Adam Young say? He said it's embodied hope. Which means it's cased in our whole body, not just our brain. But I mean, there are some people who would say that there's not much differentiation between the brain and the rest of our body. I don't know where I land. I mean, I understand where they're coming from. It's yeah, I haven't done enough research on that, but yeah, that idea of embodied hope,
Mm.
of seeing that God's presence is truly within the deepest recesses of our minds and brains, and bodies, I think is pretty hope producing. Because I don't
Yeah.
know about you, but I tend to walk around I used to walk around thinking, well, nobody knows what's really going on inside here, or even God, how can he get, no, but.
Well, neuroscientists don't know either, frankly, and there's a lot of
Yes,
I think
when you consider how many billions of neurons are in the average human brain, yes, there's no way they can, which is another indication of how magnificent God is.
Yeah, and I mean, to the point about the fact that we're embodied creatures, you will find neuroscientists almost always falling back on language that equates thinking with the firing of neurons in the brain, as if brains think. And I mean, from a theologian's perspective, I think that's really not quite the truth. I mean, people think. Brains are inextricably related to that process. But let me back up to a very fundamental question that was asked earlier about spiritual formation and the truth. This participant was concerned that we might actually, if we view this truth as coming from inside us, it makes things quite subjective. So is there, when we relate truth to spiritual formation, isn't ultimately truth, doesn't that come from outside of us? Doesn't that ultimately come from Jesus Christ or God?
Yes, it does. I'm not quite sure what this person is asking, but I would say, yes, that truth does come from him, but I also think it's inside of us because he put it inside of us. Because remember what Dallas Willard says, that everybody has an experience of spiritual formation. It's just what they follow, who they follow in that spiritual formation path. So, and I also like what Dallas Willard has said about the brain is really the heart. And you'll find that Adam Young and Kurt Thompson and Dan Allen, they all kind of use that language too. Yeah.
And I think one of the things we would have to tackle in this course is getting our head straight on the biblical terms, soul, mind, heart, spirit. What's going on there, and how do we relate all of those? But that's for those who might be interested in this class. I just got a great question. Other than insecure attachment, what other neuro pathways may hinder our spiritual formation? Are there many? And this person is thinking about people who have a secure attachment but have no attachment to God.
Well, that's an interesting question. There's lots of parts to that. Even though it doesn't seem like it, I would first want to know what that secure attachment that this person sees in this other person, what it looks like and who it's with. I mean, it could be that they were securely attached to a primary caregiver who was an atheist and did not have any knowledge of God, or passed on any knowledge of God. Good question, Tiffany. Something that I really have to think about. Yeah, I'll think about that. I guess I just haven't had that experience. I'm glad you have. I really am glad you have. I don't know very many securely attached people, so maybe that's says something about the company I keep. I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder, we've got someone saying, I wonder if that connects to this issue of toxic Christian communities, where there's plenty of guilt to go around.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes, I think maybe that's a good connection, because when we were talking about what spiritual formation was, and I mean, I remember learning about the spiritual disciplines, and even just saying spiritual disciplines, there's this gut level reaction to the word discipline. And yet that's what we hear from our pastors a lot, right? Well, do this, do that. Are you fasting? Are you praying? Are you meditating? Are you reflecting? Well, those things really don't promote a relationship. They may emanate from a good relationship, but they don't start a good relationship with God.
Or we may, my experience with church discipline or spiritual discipline, I probably needed to be the subject of church discipline at some point, was certainly, I felt an overwhelming sense of obligation. And I don't know if there was any joy or deep sense of longing or need for God. I mean, I'm only just now, I think, starting to tap into those deeper longings, and I'm not sure how I've gotten there, other than just life happening.
Yeah. Well, I'm at the same place, so yeah. And secure attachment with God or anybody is supposed to be joyful, especially with God. It's supposed to be fantastically joyful.
Amen.
It's not supposed to be burdensome at all.
That's right. That's right. If I will hang on a few more seconds to see if we've got any more questions for Nia. What I'm just looking at our time. We're almost out of time, and we've been finishing early almost every week, just to respect people's time. But yeah, if you have something you want to say, Nia, go right ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say to the IT person that I know I'm getting out of the center, but I just wanted to point out that picture there. So that picture I had commissioned, that was a spiritual experience that I had, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. So it's a representation of it. So the top dark part is me being buried under rocks of sin and insecure attachment. and one by one handing them over to Jesus. And then the bottom is when the end product of me handing them all over, what happened. So I don't know if you all can see that. And if I lift this higher, there's another, I don't know how, well, maybe I can't. Another picture up there of me dancing with Jesus, which is another artist's representation of another vision that I had through this whole process of learning about interpersonal neurobiology and spiritual formation. So
that's lovely. It's fascinating too.
Anybody wants to see, I'll get out of the way. I don't know if I can, I got so many cords going here. I don't want to lift my computer up.
It's quite all right. Wow. Well, thank you, Nia. This was all fascinating and extremely stimulating. And I'm hopefully some of my neurocircuitry is being repaired right now as we speak. But
well, thank you everybody for your interest and for your questions and for putting me on the spot even and making me think. Good job. That's the kind of class that I would like to have, is one that makes us all think.
Amen. Amen. Okay. Well, a good evening to everyone. And again, a brief reminder, next week, Melody Green will be talking about redemption in children's stories. So you're welcome back. And thanks again for your participation. And we hope you all have a wonderful evening. God bless you all.
Night.
Good night.